sucks. Nickelback, Nickelback sucks. Nickelback sucks. Nickelback, screw you, Nickelback. I hope your lead singer, Chad Kroeger, gets killed in a bear attack. Ha! That'd be funny. I'd put money on it, but I'll tell you what, how much I wouldn't put on it, a fucking nickel.
Who has a nickel back them up?
I don't know. That's just like... Who asks for a Nickelback?
Welcome to Polishing Turds with Nick and Cal. My name is Nick.
And I'm Cal.
And this is the show where we take a deep dive into the wonderful world of bad music. And today at long last, we are talking about Nickelback.
Holy shit.
Yes, that's right, Nickelback, the Canadian quartet that just might be the most hated rock and roll band of all time.
We're doing this, motherfucker. It's not like we'll say sorry. Gonna craft a compelling story.
Oh God, Cal, like it just feels like forever in the making, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was actually thinking back when this show was just a gleam in our eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this band was one of the first ones we talked about. Like we made a list of bands we should cover.
Yeah.
And this was in like the first three. It was like on our minds immediately.
Well, I knew that even describing to other people what our podcast is about, it's like, oh, we do a show about bad music and we try to examine their whole discography and see how bad they are. And one of the top three responses is like, oh, like Nickelback?
Yeah.
Or, oh, when are you going to do Nickelback?
Yep.
We always meant to, but it was such a heavy hitter that I think we were scared to do it early, you know?
Yes, wisely. You know, we go back and listen to our own show, and I don't think in those early ones we could have done this justice. We had to get good at the techniques of doing this show.
Yes. So now, maybe now we're at a point where we're kind of good enough to do this. No, it's exciting. And, this is a band that just has such a reputation, but also such a passionate, legit fan base. If you listen to our Avril Lavigne series, I mentioned the concept of Chad pilling. Do you remember what that was, Cal?
Yeah, there's like a subsection of the fan base that's convinced the only reason people don't like Nickelback is because we've all had so much anti-Nickelback propaganda shoved in our faces that, we just assume they're terrible.
Yeah.
Or already go in thinking they're terrible. And that's just stuck with people.
Yeah. So that once you actually listen to the music, once you take the Chad pill, as it were, then you could see the truth about the world. And that Nickelback's actually really awesome and Chad Kroeger's a genius. So yeah, I took the Chad pill. I listened to all 9 of their albums. I know you've listened to many of them as well.
I listened to all of them.
Yeah. So
I can't believe I did it.
So we will share with you over the next few episodes what that pill did to us and how our vision of reality is altered, because one way or another, I think it definitely is.
I will never be the same.
I
can say that definitively.
All right, so here's the thing, folks. Cal and I started this podcast about a year and a half ago, and like we just said, from the very beginning, I feel like the shadow of Nickelback has just kind of loomed over us. They're like a white whale, a daunting prize that we could just never hope to capture. I mean, it took us this long to even attempt to cover Nickelback for a reason, and even now, I'm not sure if we can do them justice.
I like the white whale metaphor, because I feel like have you ever read Moby Dick?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that so much of that book is like the preparation involved.
Yeah.
Rather than the actual task of hunting the whale.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we didn't want to shoot our proverbial load too early.
No,
and do this band too early.
No, we had to work up to this. So artists like Tattoo and Vanilla Ice, like you were our practice girls. Now, Nickelback is more than a band. They're more than a bad band. For many people, they're the epitome of bad music itself. They're a cultural doormat, a cheap punchline for hack comedians. Want to describe to someone how much this or that thing sucks? Just compare it to Nickelback. Want to turn people against the new guy at the office? Tell everyone his favorite band is Nickelback.
Dude, my day is totally ruined. I went to go get a colonoscopy and Nickelback was on in the waiting room.
Proctologist's like, I gotta deal with shit all day.
Yeah.
And now Nickelback.
And now Nickelback's on. It's just too easy. It's just too easy to take pot shots at them.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you don't have to think about. You don't have to justify it. You're supposed to hate Nickelback. And in today's increasingly polarized world, it's probably the only thing we can all agree on. And yet, all of that belies a rather inconvenient truth. People like Nickelback. Lots and lots of people. With over 50 million records sold, they're one of the most commercially successful bands of modern times. And in an age where rock and roll is dying, these guys consistently sell out stadiums across the world. How can this be? How can a band be so popular and simultaneously so reviled? What exactly is it about Nickelback that people hate? And for that matter, what exactly about them do people love? What if this bizarre duality isn't about the band at all, but rather about us as a people, as a culture? Can we pinpoint what exactly made Nickelback the monstrosity they've become? And if so, can we learn from it?
My quick theory is, lots of people also like the Kardashians or like the movie Avatar. You know what I mean?
And those are also like hated. Like
we all agree they're bad,
venomously
but they
by a lot of
stay
people.
popular.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is what I really hope we learn from Nickelback, or why I'm excited to do this, is this kind of applies to a lot of shit in our modern culture.
Yeah.
That it just is in our public consciousness, even though we all agree it's terrible.
Well, it's like it's kind of like we talked about in the Avril Lavigne is Dead episode. It's like this could have theoretically happened to any artist, but why her specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've covered a lot of bad artists, like with the possible exception of Creed. I don't think anyone has reached like this level of like memification.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So if you're new to this podcast, questions like these are what Polishing Turds is all about. We take the artists that our society tells us to hate and examine them and their music with an open mind. And so it shall be for the next few weeks as Cal and I seek to unravel the sinuous mystery that is Nickelback. All right, without further ado, are you ready, Cal?
I am so fucking ready.
Let's polish this turd!
Never made it as a wise man. I couldn't cut it as a poor man stealing. Tired of living like a blind man. I'm sick aside without a sense of feeling. And this is how you remind me. This is how you remind me of what I really am. This is how you remind me of what I really am. It's not like you to say sorry. I was waiting on a different story. This time I'm mistaken for handing you a heart worth breaking. And I've been wrong, I've been down, been to the bottom of every bottle. These five words in my head scream, are we having fun yet? Yeah, 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 no, no. Yeah, 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 no, no. It's not like you didn't know that. I said I love you and I swear I still do.
Okay, Cal, so I gotta confess something off the bat. After listening to the entirety of Nickelback's discography, I've determined that there are exactly 3 songs that I genuinely like and one that I'm not so sure about. And the one that I'm not so sure about is How You Remind Me.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is like I will at times find myself kind of liking it, but I don't know if that's because it's actually good or if it's just the song has literally beaten me into submission.
I have been singing this piece of shit all week. I can't even help myself. I think I have exactly 0 I like, but unironically is the key word. There's a few that They're so bad that I love them.
There are some that are like that, especially as we kind of get into their later discography.
Well, and actually, I want to give this disclaimer up front. So I've noticed a lot of times our part 2 and 3s or whatever have less listens than the part 1s.
Yeah.
I feel like that sucks because the part 1 is like the origin story of a superhero movie. Like most of the time I feel like the funniest, most entertaining crap is in the latter half of these bands' discography.
No, usually like part 2 is usually The Empire Strikes Back. Like it only gets better.
And I guess, so I'll just say right now, so their first part of their discography, I'm taking us off track, Nick. We'll have to go back to the script.
No, continue by all means.
First part of the discography is not the worst thing ever. I am not going to say good. We're not going that far. It gets hilariously bad as you go.
100%. I completely agree with that. So let me give our listeners an idea of how this series is going to progress. So this is going to be a 4-part series. In the first 2 parts, we're going to be doing the traditional polishing turds thing and covering their discography, going through their story and their albums one by one. And then in parts 3 and 4, it's going to be more deeper analysis where we're going to talk about, I guess you can call it Nickelback the phenomenon, right? How Nickelback became such a meme, what other people have said about them, how this kind of mythology of Nickelback as the worst band on earth came into existence. And also, we're going to talk about what people actually like about Nickelback. I did a fan survey, a little questionnaire that I posted on Facebook and Reddit. We're asking like real Nickelback fans what they like about Nickelback. And I think the results are going to be very, very interesting for people.
Before we dive in, I got to pull it back to how you remind me one more time. Because I have a theory, Nick, of you're saying you're not sure if you like it. But let me ask you this and look deep in your soul. Before you... If you were driving at night and you're listening to like a classic rock station and this came on, would you leave it?
Yes, for, pardon the pun, all the wrong reasons.
Right. Maybe you'd leave it for one verse and one chorus and then be like, all right,
it'd be for pure nostalgia because, Cal, you and I were old enough to remember when this band first broke big, right?
Yes. And a lot like Creed, I'm ashamed to admit when this song came out, I kind of liked it then.
I think like it's going to sound hard to believe, but back then you had no choice. Like it's like there was a time, and I think it was right when How You Remind Me broke, where everybody liked Nickelback.
Yes.
Because it was just this song. And I've mentioned countless times on this show how much I watched VH1 when I was 13, which is weird because that put me like 30 years younger than every other VH1 watcher. But, they like had a freaking orgasm over this song. Like it became like the Nickelback channel for a few months. And so like this song was fucking everywhere. And I think for people who are younger and don't really understand why Nickelback is so as huge as they still are, I think you had to be there. I think.
Oh, you absolutely had to be there. You
had to experience the phenomenon that was How You Remind Me. And that's why I say I think it's beaten me into submission because it just like the Pledge of Allegiance, it was drummed into my head at a young age. All right, but before we begin, let's introduce our cast of characters. Nickelback are a 4-piece band consisting of Chad Kroeger, and by the way, it is Kroeger, not Kroeger. I know I fucked that up in previous episodes.
I'm not sure I buy that. I know that's what he says on paper, but I was like thinking of think of Kroeger the grocery store. They actually use a U.
They I thought they were pronounced Kroeger.
Oh.
we just get everything
This whole
wrong?
name just sucks.
So Kroeger, think of shoe, SHOE, that's KROE. Kroeger.
I'm gonna think of Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. Just and I know that I'm gonna fuck it up throughout this series. I'm gonna get it wrong at least once. If I haven't already in this episode. Okay, so yeah, Chad Kroeger does lead vocals and guitar. His brother Mike Kroeger plays bass. Ryan Peake handles rhythm guitar, and Daniel Adair is the drummer. And they've had a few lineup changes at the drummer position, but otherwise this lineup has been the same since the band formed in 1995.
This is kind of your first little sign that So all the people that say Chad's a secret genius,
Yeah.
every like difficult to work with genius musician I've seen has a revolving door of musicians around them.
Yeah.
This stable lineup is kind of like your first hint that like this is a business and these guys are employees. This is not like a artistic integrity thing.
No, and a lot of the other guys that have left didn't leave by choice, from what I understand.
Okay.
So I think the other three are like they're along for the ride, and I can't blame them. It's a
great gig.
It's a cash cow to end all cash cows. But we'll touch upon the internal dynamics of this band a little bit, because it's definitely not a democracy, but I don't think it's a total dictatorship either. But obviously the band is led by Chad Kroeger, who writes or co-writes basically all of Nickelback's songs, although the other guys do kind of chip in here and there. And even though we're going to be making fun of Chad a lot in this series, don't get it twisted, I want to say something up front, and that is let's just acknowledge writing an entire album's worth of songs, let alone 9 albums worth of songs. That's really fucking hard work. It is. And just consider that a lot of the artists we've already covered weren't responsible for even half of the songs that are credited to them. So let's just acknowledge, like, Chad, you've relatively other pop stars, you've put in a lot of effort.
Yeah, I mean, we just covered his, ex-wife Avril. I think the main focus of that series was how little of her own music she probably wrote. So
yeah, and on at least one album, most of it was written by Chad himself. So and he's written a lot of stuff for other bands and singers too. So we'll get into some of that stuff later on as well. And furthermore, as even his biggest detractors will admit, Chad knows how to write a catchy tune. His songs are grounded in a radio-friendly pop structure with memorable hooks, simple lyrics, and no excessive instrumentation. Nickelback songs usually get right to the point and rarely extend longer than 4 minutes or less than 3.
I once read something that like the difference between like very smart people and geniuses. Okay, and so like by definition, it's a very smart person can memorize a pattern and regurgitate it well. Mm-hmm. So that's like what I was good at doing in school is just you taught me this a while ago and I remember it. Here it is on a test. The genius is the guy making the new pattern. He's the guy discovering the new equation that's like, oh shit, no one thought of that before.
Yeah, he's that rare Captain Beefheart, diamond in the rough kind of guy.
By definition, I don't buy the argument that Chad's a secret music genius. He's a very smart musician. He is amazing at taking something he knows works from other songs and putting it in his own songs.
I think he is a genius of a type.
Yeah.
And we will get into what that type is in short order. Now, just as an example of what we're talking about, take the song you just heard, How You Remind Me. It jumps right into its opening lines with no musical intro. Within the first minute, the song establishes 3 memorable hooks. So first, you have the pre-chorus. This is how you remind me of what I really am. Then you have the chorus. And then after that, you have the post-chorus refrain. Now, I first heard that song 20 years ago, and until last month, I made no conscious effort to ever listen to it again. And yet, I swear to God, throughout that time, I could still sing every fucking word of How You Remind Me. That is how deep Chad's tentacles reach.
Dude, I love that metaphor. Chad is like this ancient Lovecraftian tentacle monster.
He's summoned by the Necronomicon.
Well, and he worms his way into your brain, similar to like a Cthulhu would. I mean, he's made musical hostages of us, Nick.
Yeah,
he's in your brain, and I actually think a lot of his fandom is some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome going on.
There are aspects to true Nickelback fandom that vaguely resemble a cult to me.
Yeah.
Like just the way that some people talk about him.
He sold his soul, and that was the gift he got in return, is like the ability to just like live in your soul rent free somehow with these little hooks that work.
Like I can't tell you how many times just like listening through that discography, I was like, oh, I remember that one.
Yep.
Like, or at least the melody, if not the words. And like, it just all comes back to me, even though I probably only heard it like half drunk at a Wisconsin bar 15 years ago.
Yep.
You know, it's insane. So all in all, perhaps he never made it as a wise man, but when it comes to writing radio earworms, Chad Kroeger is an evil genius.
Evil, very smart person.
Now, to understand who Nickelback are, you have to understand the environment they grew up in. Nickelback come from the small, remote town of Hanna, Alberta. When I say small, I mean a population of less than 3,000. When I say remote, I mean it's a solid 2.5 hours away from Calgary, the nearest actual city, with little in between but prairie grass and oil rigs. In other words, it's the kind of town where kids have to learn to entertain themselves. Some of them get into drunken fistfights, some of them smoke weed and commit petty misdemeanors, and some try to express their latent frustration through music. The guys in Nickelback would end up doing all of these things.
At least they weren't out serial killing.
That we know of.
That's the old Wisconsin tradition. He may have committed musical atrocities, but at least he wasn't like, collecting body parts in his basement or something.
Well, no, it's
allegedly.
If he had like listened to Mayhem instead of Metallica, maybe he would have gone that direction. So Chad Kroeger was born Chad Robert Turton on I don't like the sound of that last name. Turton.
Yeah, no, good. That was a wise change.
Yeah. He was born on November 15th, 1974. His biological father, Wendell, was a rough and tumble man who liked to get into fistfights. Wendell left the family when Chad was 2, after which Chad and his brother Mike took on their mother's maiden name, Kroeger. The boys spent much of their childhood in near poverty, and in Chad, this bred a sense of anger and rebelliousness. In the song Photograph, Chad paints a picture of a misspent youth in Hanna.
Oh, we're busting that one out this early?
Yeah, but just for context. So, check it.
All right.
And this is where I went to school. Most of the time had better things to do. Criminal record says I've broken twice. I must have done it 6 times.
Now this is essentially true, although the real story is even more delinquent. Chad really did break into his school. Not 6 times, but closer to 11, he would later claim. Yeah, he says that he would bust in when he was like 13, 14 and steal money from the school, which he says he says there was a safe and he managed to get the combination or pick the lock or something, and he would steal several $100 at a time.
Wow.
And he used that to buy guitars and shit.
Oh, likely story. I just loved music so much. He was buying candy and weed, man. That's what
Of course he was. So he got busted for this eventually when he was 14, and he actually spent 2 months at a juvenile detention facility. And then in later years, Chad got arrested for stealing a farmer's truck and faced a possible 18 months in grown-up jail. Now, thankfully for Chad, his lawyer managed to plead this down to joyriding, which is a misdemeanor in Alberta, apparently.
Okay.
So it kind of brings to mind when we talked about Billy Ray Cyrus and how he kind of had this very rebellious streak in him early on. Like, he was just a natural troublemaker.
Yep, a lot of people are.
But teenage hooliganism aside, Chad did have a few things going for him. He was outgoing, confident, and popular with his classmates.
I gotta say, everything you listed up to this point, I mean, sounds awesome to a 14-year-old. So
Yeah,
I
right?
get it. Oh, he breaks into the school.
Yeah,
He stole Farmer John's truck.
Yeah, I know. It's and it's even more interesting when you consider this is a small town and everyone knows each other.
Right.
And, he steals some kid's bike, everyone knows it was him. It's just oh, there goes Chad again.
Yeah, Chad on Jimmy's bike. He painted it red. He thought we wouldn't notice.
So it's it's delinquent, but also oddly charming.
Yeah.
And obviously he wasn't, as you might expect, he wasn't much of a student. He had better things to do most of the time. But he was very ambitious when it came to music. He started playing guitar at the age of 13, wrote songs at 16, and overall just seemed singularly determined to become a rock star.
So this hurt a little bit to find out because I actually identify with this. That's what I thought would happen when I was this age. The difference is I didn't put in any of the work to actually make that happen. Whereas, like, you know, I have to admit, like, Chad's a little cooler than I was in hindsight.
No,
he actually started doing this shit. Whereas, you know, we were just like getting stoned and hanging out in people's basements.
and this is that X factor, and it comes up in every artist we cover. I feel like is they really had that lust to succeed.
Yeah,
they just like really needed to make it, and I think part of that is because he is living in a small town. Like most of the people who grow up in Hanna, if they're lucky, get a job in a coal mine or an oil rig. Those are basically your options out there. No one thinks about making it big in entertainment or music at all. And I'm sure everyone in town thought he was just like this ridiculous, like dumbass dreamer for thinking he was going to go out there and become the next James Hetfield. Now, one of Chad's earliest influences was Creedence Clearwater Revival, and it's easy to see why. Like Nickelback, CCR was dominated by a prolific frontman who wrote simple, catchy songs for a blue-collar audience.
they just, you know, didn't suck.
I don't wanna say it, but
I'm
no.
supposed to be non-biased. I gotta.
I hope I'm not dissing John Fogerty or CCR because I love them too, like by comparing them to Nickelback. But I just think, like, just as a point of reference, I think he said like CCR's greatest hits was the first record he ever bought. But I think that he is essentially trying to do that. Like he's trying to write catchy songs that are going to be hits on the radio and appreciated by like the kind of like regular like working class guys who show up in bars.
Yeah, no, what you're saying makes perfect sense.
But an even bigger influence was Metallica. Now this might seem a little less obvious, but I think Chad learned a lot from James Hetfield, who could masterfully marry tuneful melodies with thundering metal riffs.
Say your prayers, it's so long. Don't forget, my son, to include everyone. I tuck you in, all within, keep you free from sin, till the Sandman he comes. Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight. Exit light, and tonight. Take my hand, off to Never, Never Land.
Yeah, so like a lot of metal fans might not like to hear this, but no, like Chad constantly talks about, especially Metallica, but also Megadeth, Anthrax, all the heavy hitters of the 80s.
No, you can actually totally see it. You know, some of the songs we'll talk about, like Never Again or later, like Animals.
Yes.
Yeah, you can absolutely see the influence. I wouldn't say like Metallica's early shit, but
No, like
definitely
not-
the Black Album onwards.
Yeah, and even in like Ride the Lightning, there is like a pop sensibility buried deep within like all the thrash stuff. I really think James Hetfield at his core is a pop songwriter, and so is Chad, much more so with Chad.
Right.
Like I think he started out wanting to be a big metal guy, and then by the time he's actually trying to make it in music, like grunge is big by that point.
Yeah.
So he has to adapt to that, but at his core he is a pop songwriter.
Yep. No, yeah, totally agree.
And I think like Metallica is a great example of a band that can write these kind of like thrashy, like headbanging metal songs, but be melodic enough that like a normie, a non-metal person can get into them very easily.
Oh yeah, they were the most successful of all time at it.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. By the age of 17, Chad had dropped out of high school, and whenever he wasn't busy drinking or fucking around with his buddies, he devoted himself exclusively to music. He joined a band called Village Idiot that consisted of himself, his brother Mike, his friend Ryan Peake, and his cousin Brandon Kroeger on drums.
There's some sort of easy joke here, and I just felt too lazy to make it.
So, Village Idiot should have stuck with that.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, we did it.
Yep. So, Village Idiot, like in many bands out there, they started out as a cover band. They would play songs by Metallica, Led Zeppelin, and Pearl Jam, among others. Now, as you might imagine, the town of Hanna, Alberta didn't exactly have a thriving music scene. One of the few places the band could play was a strip club housed in a seedy old place called the National Hotel, known locally as the Nash.
The Nash.
We're going to see later on that, like, so much of Nickelback's songs sound to me like they're meant to be like stripper pole dance songs.
I was say, I think this place had a big effect on him.
I really think it kind of subconsciously affected him.
Hold tight for that, because we're going to get into how fucking lowbrow his lyrics are quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. Jesus. So gradually, the more and more Village Idiot played, the more Chad became confident of himself as a musician, and he slowly began incorporating more of his original songs into the band's set. After a few years, he and the band made the bold decision to pack up and move to Vancouver, which was really the nearest city that they could plausibly be a gigging band. Now it was in Vancouver that Mike Kroeger, working at a local Starbucks, came up with the band's name. You see, at this Starbucks, a medium coffee cost $1.95, and when a customer paid in cash, Mike would frequently find himself saying, "Here's your Nickelback." Yep. That's it. That's what Nickelback means.
It's okay. I stopped believing in things a long time ago.
It's like, it's not the worst band name I've ever heard. Like, maybe that would go to like Creed's original name, Naked Toddler.
Oh God,
but,
Naked Child or
whatever. But yeah, that's that. And as somebody who has worked in a coffee shop for way too long, I can vaguely empathize with that and see why he would think it was funny.
With inflation now, it's $1 back. I don't think there's such thing as like giving someone a nickel anymore. Does that even happen?
I'm trying to remember the last time it happened for me, but like, no, occasionally I give someone a quarterback, and at that point, if you don't put it in the tip jar,
go fuck yourself.
What the fuck are you doing?
I literally never carry change anymore. It just goes straight into tip jars, give a penny things. Yeah. I don't want it.
Right? Just swaying down your pockets. So then they're out in Vancouver. They're trying to get themselves established. And at this point, Chad decides to ask his stepdad for a loan of $4,000 to get an EP recorded, right? So somehow his stepdad agrees to this. Like Chad's like, "Oh, well, I'll pay you back $5,000 in 6 months."
Well, you never done anything bad before, Chad.
So props to Chad's stepdad for being that indulgent.
No, he unleashed evil on the world. If he had just stuck to his parental guns, we wouldn't have Nickelback.
Well, then Chad would have had to find a new way into his old school to finance that money. But here's what I find really funny is that Chad claims that he only used $2,000 to record the EP, and he spent the remaining half on psilocybin mushrooms, which he then sold at a profit to his buddies.
Okay, that's a pretty metal thing to do. That's cool. Yeah. It reminds me of the story behind Typo Negative's what is the Origin of the Feces album?
Their quote unquote live album.
Yes, I mean they had blown all the studio's money and then made a fake live album instead of a real one to fulfill the contract.
Yeah,
and they made it really funny. They made the audience hate them through the whole show.
So they, I think it was $100,000. They were given $100,000 to record a live album, and they spent $10,000 recording a studio album that sounded live, and the rest on cheap vodka. They claim.
Yeah. So when you're in that company, it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, I would not have pegged Chad for a small-time drug dealer, but hey, more power to him. So this. All of this resulted in the band's first EP, and that EP is called Hesher or Hesher, Hesher. And we were talking about bad names a moment ago. that I don't know what the fuck to say about that.
Yeah, I actually had to look up what this is. There's a weird mediocre 2010 film of the same title.
No shit. Well, according to one source I read, they had a buddy who would always say, "Hey, sure," like and it's Canada, so "Hey, sure."
Oh no!
So,
oh god!
So I guess if that's true, it is "Hey, sure." Like
if that's true, it's worse than I even thought it was.
I like when I first read that, I thought, or first read the title, I thought it was like some obscure piece of farm equipment that I didn't know about. It's like, oh, like, better watch out. We'll feed him to the Haysher.
Yeah, I pictured either like some offshoot of a Rastafarian or like a guy who spends a lot of time in an opium den.
Sure.
He's a hasher.
But anyway, let's hear a cut from Haysher. Yeah, so that is the very first exposure to Nickelback that the world, and by the world I mean like 10 people in Alberta, ever heard.
I have. It's difficult to form an opinion on this. Like, I don't like the song as a whole.
Yeah,
but there is little parts I like. Like, there's good riffs. I think when we get to Chad's, shitty Eddie Vedder impression, that I'm kind of.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I should just get out of the way. I personally do not like the sound of Chad Kroeger's voice.
No, I don't either.
And I feel like that is actually a major hurdle to me liking Nickelback. I can't pinpoint exactly what I don't like about it. It sounds grating to me, and it doesn't make me feel like invited or warm or anything.
His voice has the same problems that are apparent in his songwriting, where he's doing a shitty impression of a better artist.
Yes.
That's what he's clearly like, he was listening to a lot of grunge and he's trying to do that.
Yes. Eddie Vedder, like, I say this as a Pearl Jam fan, he has done so much unintentional harm to the world of music. An entire generation of guys that sounded like this, whether it's Creed or Puddle of Mud or whoever, like just everyone heard that.
Yeah, it became a fucking joke in the movie Ted. I mean, that's how you know it went. Yeah, it went far.
Yeah, but this song I still think is interesting when you compare it to what Nickelback is going to become just like 5 years later, right? It's a little bit more like hard rock, almost, I don't want to even say metal, but like closer to metal than how you remind me is.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of a slippery slope in the 90s. So like,
I guess it's closer to grunge. I guess grunge is more apropos. So they're following the mold of that time.
Yeah.
And just the other thing is lyrically, this song is kind of opaque. It's not I'm not 100% sure what it's about. It's like, I saw the river, just pulled him down. Before he died, I could have sworn he said, I am the only one left.
That could mean anything.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm not saying it's deep, but it's trying to be a little bit abstract.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't listen to it once and know exactly what he's talking about. And if you know anything about Nickelback, that is not the dominant trend in their music. So later on that year, most of the songs on Haysher were re-recorded and incorporated into the band's debut album, Curb, which they also self-released. And Cal, you listened to Curb. What did you think of it?
It is the exact definition of okay.
Yes.
There's nothing particularly wrong with it. But for everything we just talked about, it's super derivative. Mm-hmm. I actually had trouble finishing it because I was bored. It's not because it was bad. I wasn't sitting there cringing. I was just kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
It felt a lot like Creed's later discs or something.
Yes. It just feels like the kind of band that plays at 2:00 in the afternoon at a state fair. you
Yeah,
know?
totally.
Like it's not, it isn't bad. It isn't, there's nothing about it that makes me just cringe. Like, oh my God, how could a human being write that?
Right.
But it really just feels like knockoff Alice in Chains or
Yeah,
something
exactly.
like
When Pearl Jam exists, why would you fucking buy Curb?
that.
You know?
Yeah. It's just so, but there is one song from that album Curb that I wanted to play for you guys. This song is called Fly.
Father, tell me something. Where do bad men go when they die? Mother says you'll go there, but wings for her and I don't mind, 'cause I have always wanted to learn to fly, learn to fly, learn to fly. Brother, tell me something. If I take this, am I going to die? And he says no. So then I figure, what the hell, I'll try. 'Cause it's my life, so light the match and you and I will fly.
There is a certain band that song reminds me of. Starts with an N and ends with Anna.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, Chad may not be the most original guy in the world. We've talked about how he ripped off Eddie Vedder vocally, but this is like one of the few where like he is obviously trying to channel Kurt Cobain,
Yes.
in a
Oh,
very
God.
direct way.
Yep.
And I just thought it was interesting for that reason, and also like lyrically, like just he's trying to be deep. I don't know exactly what he's saying. I don't know if he knows it, but like at least he's trying to be some kind of poet.
Yeah. I'll get into it a little bit more later when we cover the next one, but these early albums, I will at least admit, he's still trying to be an artist in some way.
Yes,
There's some artistic integrity to these.
Yes. So that song that you just heard, Fly, it actually got a tiny bit of attention from radio programmers in Vancouver. They got a little bit of attention from local producers and small-time industry people. But like on the whole, Curb just didn't make a big splash.
To no one's surprise.
Yeah. But the key with Nickelback is they kept at it. And they spent the next few years like just hanging around Vancouver, doing like literally whatever they could to survive. At one point, Chad took a job selling seafood door to door, which
I don't think I'd buy my seafood from a door-to-door salesman.
especially one that looks like
I
Chad
know.
Kroeger.
It's like, what if you actually buy something? You're like, all right, I'll take the calamari, and he goes to his fucking trunk in 90-degree weather.
Yeah, he just like brings out a
It's
cooler.
It's a squid in a bag. There's not even ice on it. Here you go.
God, that reminds me of this one time. I was living in Seattle about 10 years ago, and there's this famous greasy spoon restaurant called Beth's. They're really like well known locally.
I think you took me there when I
Oh,
visited
I
you.
did. Yeah, that's
I know
right.
Beth's.
So they're in the Aurora neighborhood, which, if you know Seattle, is like kind of a shadier part of town. And Beth's is also open 24/7, or at least they were back in the day. One time, my friends and I were there, and we're like drunk and high, almost certainly. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and this guy shows up at the door, like this very like shady looking, white as a ghost dude shows up with a plastic bag, and and inside the bag is a dead rabbit, and he goes to the lead cook and he tries to sell them the dead rabbit for $10, which
You can make it into like a soup. I don't know.
which like of all the hustles I've heard, that has got to be the saddest one I've ever seen face to face.
You want this?
So on the on the 2% chance that guy is still alive, like I just want to say, dude, whoever you are, I hope you cleaned yourself up. I hope things are going okay now.
Or at least you found someone for your rabbit hustle.
I hope someone did buy that rabbit off. Yeah. Okay. So back to Chad. He also at one point worked for a telemarketing company. He described that gig at one point as consisting of, quote, sucking money out of poor old ladies. So some Glengarry Glen Ross shit,
sure.
I guess.
Oh, so he was out there trying to cut it as a poor man stealing, you know?
Exactly.
That's all his lyrics come from somewhere.
But could he make it?
I couldn't.
And meanwhile, the band would continue to grind away, playing whatever dive bars and doing whatever they could to hone their craft. They did this in spite of some instability behind the kit. Their original drummer Brandon Kroeger left Nickelback in 1997, replaced first by a guy named Mitch Guidon, and later by Ryan Vicadol. Ryan is the guy that he played on How You Remind Me. He's the one that does that little drum fill that it's in the beginning.
Yep. Okay. I actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think that actually is legit my favorite moment in any Nickelback song. It's just that one drum fill.
Dude, this is like a weird, bizarro version of the Beatles' origin story.
Yeah.
This
really.
is what they were doing. They were
I
touring around Germany.
Yeah, that is exactly true.
Again, they just had talent.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop.
The band also signed with a management company, but Chad wasn't satisfied with their efforts, so he fired them, and the band began essentially managing themselves. Chad would contact radio program directors to try to get their music played, Mike would visit record stores to try to get the band's CDs stocked, and Ryan would oversee the band's website. So, like, overall, these guys, they're hustling.
Yeah.
And whatever else I have to say about Nickelback's music, I respect them on this level, that they put in the work to sell their music.
Yeah. Oh, coming up as an organically created group is crazy difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So even when they get famous for music I hate,
yeah,
I have to respect that end of it. Now, if you're fucking like Imagine Dragons or something where you're a studio creation, this doesn't apply to you. But,
yeah.
But the bands that actually, get noticed the original way that this used to happen.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
We've seen that with Creed. We've seen that with Limp Bizkit. Like, a lot of guys, like, no matter what you think of them, there was a time where they were just the guy working at the gas station,
yep.
and putting all of his extra hours into this band that they love so dearly. By 1998, the band was ready to record their second album, The State. This too was an independent release, financed with a $30,000 loan that Ryan had somehow managed to obtain from a local bank.
Damn, that's even a better hustle than Chad and his stepdad.
Yeah, no. It's like he had some kind of connection. I think it was something like his dad ran like a farm equipment company back home or something, and so he had the connection to some farm bank, and I think he used maybe not entirely honest pretenses to we're starting a business, Nickelback Enterprises. It's a cash machine company. It's like Coinstar but cooler. And okay, so as far as the album The State goes, how do you feel about that one, Cal?
The first half of this album might be my favorite Nickelback album, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it peters out at the halfway point pretty bad. But I like this one because this is probably their artistic peak. As sad as that is, we're already hitting the peak.
I think I kind of agree with you, Cal. It's like when I was doing my marathon Nickelback sessions, I got to that one. I'm like, okay, maybe these guys aren't as bad as I thought. And then like you said, the latter half isn't quite as good as the first 4-ish songs, but they're absolutely trying. The songwriting is getting a little bit more sophisticated. They're writing about stuff that's at least honest and close to their experience. There's songs about growing up in a small town, doing the kind of criminal shit that we know Chad was doing.
But it wasn't so pandering yet.
No.
Yeah, he's writing about it in an interesting way.
Yes, he absolutely is. And also just like with that $30,000, there is a noticeable uptick in the production quality.
Yes. And I guess I will also say there's one I like more later, but for the completely wrong reasons. that there's one that's in the so bad it's good territory.
Yes.
This one is just actually like, this is a solid 7 out of 10 record.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the fact that I knew this was Nickelback, like if this was like my cousin's band, like
I'd pitch in and
like,
buy
hey,
one
this
of
is
them.
dope. Like, I might like, promote them on Facebook or some shit like that.
Yep, totally agree.
So the state also features one of the 3 Nickelback songs that I actually do like. This song is called "Leader of Men."
Turn your television off, and I will sing a song. And if you suddenly have the urge, you can sing along. I touch your hand, touch your face. I think the fruit is rotten. Give me lessons on how to breathe, 'cause I think I've forgotten. Think I've forgotten. One day out to a cliff that overlooks the water. I didn't see a girl. It was somebody's daughter. Now the ring is on my hand was given to me by her.
Yeah, it's weird, man. I was kind of talking to people at Nickelback ahead of this, saying that we're going to do it, and a weird amount of people knew this song existed in the first place.
Really?
And the consensus seemed to be, well, that was an actually good song. Like everyone seems to remember "Leader of Men"
Interesting.
fairly fondly.
Yeah, I think it was like a little bit before our time, perhaps. I never heard this song until I started doing the research, but this was kind of their first like song that got significant airplay. So that makes sense that people would kind of remember it if they were like really into music.
Yeah,
back
if they
then.
were in the scene, yeah.
So I mean, this is a weird one because it doesn't sound a whole lot like a Nickelback song.
No,
does
not
it?
at all. Besides Chad's voice, that's the only giveaway.
Yeah, and Chad like initially didn't want to like even put this one to tape because of that very fact that like he knew it was kind of an outlier in his own output, but people like close to him liked it so much that they kind of insisted he put it on the record, and it ended up being the lead single off the state. What's interesting about this one to me is like we said at the very beginning, like Nickelback songs, they get right to the point, right? This song does not. This one,
No.
like the sample you just heard, it doesn't really do the whole thing justice. Like this song actually takes a lot of time to build into what it becomes.
Yeah.
And I just like I think it kind of pleases me. Like, I'm not saying it's like genius or anything,
Right,
but
right.
it's like that. This is a not bad Nickelback song.
I agree. It's probably, if I had to pick one, like if someone gun to my head, which Nickelback song do you want to listen to right now? I'm probably picking that.
Yes, if one had to survive for the aliens that conquer us and write a history of Earth music 3,000 years from now, like if one of them had to survive, you'd probably pick this one. And also in terms of the subject matter, supposedly this song was written while Chad was under the influence of mushrooms. Yeah, maybe the same one
That's
he bought
why
with
it's
his dad's
good.
money. But yeah, so it's supposedly about the experience of being on magic mushrooms.
Oh, that's fun. Okay.
So we have a challenge for you guys at home. Take mushrooms, and if you can do it safely and responsibly, like obviously, like have a sitter and like be safe. But then once your trip is going and like things are locked in, listen to Nickelback's discography and tell us if this really is like the the best vibin' Nickelback song to trip to.
The challenge mode, too, for our musician friends is take mushrooms and try and write a better song than Leader of Men. Then we can talk. Then you're allowed to talk shit.
I personally know people that have done that.
Yeah.
So through a combination of constant touring and relentless self-promotion, Nickelback managed to sell 10,000 copies of The State independently. Now, this caught the attention of two major labels. The first was EMI Music Canada, who re-released The State in 1999. The second was Roadrunner Records, who also re-released The State in the United States, giving Nickelback their first crack at the American market. And Cal, I want to take a little bit to talk about Roadrunner Records, because it's not really the most obvious fit for Nickelback at this point, is it?
No, they're at least in this time period pretty much made all their money on metal bands, or a lot of big mainstream metal bands that you might have actually heard of were signed with Roadrunner. Yeah,
so they released stuff by King Diamond, Obituary, Sepultura, the aforementioned Typo Negative, and then around this same time period as they're signing Nickelback, they also put out Slipknot's first album, which maybe that somehow is the genesis of the eventual feud that Chad would have with Corey Taylor. I don't know. But they were label mates. I've heard that some metalheads kind of take issue with this, as Nickelback was kind of the first non-metal band that Roadrunner put on their roster.
I kind of get it. So I don't. You guys probably know, metalheads are a pretty fickle group.
Yes.
Lots of gatekeeping going on, and but in the case of Roadrunner, as far as metal labels go, they were already on the mainstream end, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you had some obscure ass black metal label, I don't know, Bestial Rape Records, which is a real one. If they signed Nickelback, I would totally understand the fan outrage.
Actually, I think that would be really awesome if that happened. If some super indie label signed Nickelback as a joke.
Yeah.
Did that. I bet Matador could sign Nickelback.
Even something like Southern Lord, they're the ones that do Sun O and
Boris or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Even them, that'd be really silly.
Yep.
To sign Nickelback. But I guess I also get it if you're a diehard Sepultura fan or something, and you really think of yourself as this big tough guy, and you love your label, and
and I think back then a lot more people got new music through catalogs and promotional mailers that
I still kind of do.
This is largely pre good internet, right?
I still sort of do that, the little flyers that you order something from Season of Mist, they send a little flyer. And then you'll see a few and be like, oh yeah, that's good too.
But I have to say, on a personal level, and I'm not saying this is what Roadrunner did, but I have no problem with a record label signing one, Nickelback band as a cash cow and using that to finance other projects that might not make as much money, but but are worth having their music put out there.
I totally agree. At our age, you're a little more business savvy, and it's easier to look at it that way.
Yes,
they have to stay afloat somehow.
Yeah, they saw that Nickelback was gaining a genuine grassroots audience by themselves, and they must have just seen that these guys have what it takes. So, going back a little bit to the Leader of Men song, this was really, like we said, this was the first Nickelback song to become a big radio hit. But one of the interesting things is that part of the reason they were able to get their foot in the door, especially with Canadian radio, was because of something called Canadian content laws. Now, Cal, have you do you know anything about it's called CanCon, Canadian content regulations?
Not even a little bit.
Yeah. I didn't put this in the original script. It was kind of a rabbit hole I kind of fell into. But basically what this is all about is there is a series of laws that began in the 70s that stipulate that a certain percentage of content on Canadian TV and radio has to come from Canadian artists.
Okay.
So they do this because just especially in the 60s, a lot of stuff that was being played on their radio was the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
The Doors, i.e. American and British artists. A lot of stuff on TV was like, MASH, what's happening? American TV shows. A lot of films that are in Canadian theaters. Jaws, Star Wars,
Right.
American stuff. So
Well-
it's affirmative action for their own people.
Well, some good must have come from it though, because there's so many Canadian artists I love that I wonder if they were helped by this.
I think a lot were, and it has, this whole subject has a weird history. Maybe we can do some sort of mini-sode on it someday, but it kind of came about because there was a time when Canadians kind of didn't take their own talent seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that if it came from Canada, it wasn't really legit, as opposed to stuff that was coming out of Hollywood or New York. So when the laws were first passed, these radio programmers, they had to dedicate this amount of time to Canadian stuff. So they would pack it into off-peak hours, post 10 p.m. or
Sure.
stuff like that. And in Canada, these were known as the Beaver Hours.
Is that really the name you want
Yeah.
to give your artist?
Yeah, so it was beaver music from the beaver bin, they used to call it.
Okay.
And at the same time, there was this weird paradox because if you left Canada for the US, you were kind of a sellout. But
I
also
just don't want to be in the beaver bin anymore.
yeah, but also if you stayed, you weren't good enough. And thirdly, if you went to the US and came back for whatever reason, you you just didn't make it.
Right.
So it's they had this weird stigma about their own artists that lasted for a long time.
Huh.
I think it's better nowadays, now that you've had a lot of success stories, not just with Nickelback and Avril Lavigne, but later with Drake, The Weeknd, Justin Bieber, legit Canadian artists that are superstars in America and the rest of the world. A lot of this has gone away, but it's a weird little footnote in the history of Canadian music, which admittedly I know exceedingly little about. If you're Canadian, feel free to chime in and tell us how much shit I've gotten wrong here. But it's something I just I wasn't really expecting this to be a thing.
Tell us how your dreams were crushed. Your musical dreams were completely crushed at birth because you're Canadian.
All right, so by this point, needless to say, Nickelback were gaining serious traction. With the power of Roadrunner behind them, the state wound up selling 500,000 copies. The band embarked on a 200-show tour to promote the album, during which time they opened for bands such as Silverchair and, I'm not kidding, Creed. Let's just pause for a moment to reflect on the amazing fact that there are, at minimum, tens of thousands of people on the North American continent that can say they saw Creed and Nickelback
Dude.
on the same bill.
If I unironically went to that show because I thought it'd be good, and as an adult now, I think I'd hide that from people. It doesn't seem like that's going to Encanto or something as a single male with no kids. And that's a fine movie and I love Pixar, but you guys get what I'm saying, right?
Ladies, imagine going on a date with a guy, going back to his apartment, and somewhere in his bedroom he's got a framed ticket stub that says Creed and Nickelback on it.
Is this real?
Yeah, baby.
This isn't as some kind of ironic hipster joke.
It's
no,
oh my god,
it was the best night of my life.
It's oh my god, when they played Leader of Men, I just came in my pants. But all the while, Chad Kroeger knew that his band had a higher ceiling than that. Nickelback's increasing success seemed to only intensify his determination to reach higher echelons. And sometime around 2001, Chad began devoting his time to studying popular music with almost scientific precision. Here's what he later told one interviewer, quote, "I started studying every piece, everything sonically, everything lyrically, everything musically, chord structure. I would dissect every single song that I would hear on the radio or every song that had ever done well in a chart And I would say, why did this do well?
See, this is what I was getting at earlier.
Yes.
This is the exact opposite of artistic integrity. Okay, this is trying to crack the formula. And I don't think at any point, like Chad, through his life, I don't think he ever thought of himself as like an artiste. He wanted to be a fucking rock star.
Yes.
He wanted money and bitches right from the beginning. He was like some little punk that dreamed of being the coolest guy. And I think this is one of the biggest single factors into why so many people think they suck.
And I think the panderingness of Nickelback and the extent to which they would whore themselves out for radio listens, like, I think that is going to compound exponentially over time. But
Yep.
let me be a little bit of a devil's advocate here. Maybe he did start out with like just viewing Nickelback as an exclusively commercial project and engineering it exclusively to sell records and to get as popular as possible. Or maybe when he started out writing his own songs and like, okay, they're not reinventing the wheel, but like they're competent, kind of interesting rock tunes. Maybe he finds over time, and as he deals with A&R reps, as he goes to meetings, as he hustles radio engineers, as he plays before actual audiences and actual bars, maybe he starts to develop a sense of what works and what doesn't. And maybe it's the incentive structure that's forcing him to shy away from the decisions that might be more artistic and towards the ones that might be more radio friendly. I'm not saying that's what happened.
Sure.
I'm just saying that I think that natural incentive structure drives a lot of musicians, especially ones that have to pay the rent somehow.
Like a musical Carlos Mencia.
Kind of like, just like behind every Carlos Mencia, every Dane Cook, every hack out there, there's a guy that spent months or years like doing open mic night and like, scraping up enough money to buy a Whopper as his daily meal.
Well, and I'm aware most pop music is written this way.
Mhm.
Like I get that, but it's done by session musicians that don't take all the credit. They give it to you. Because that too, it's, I guess that's where I get hung up on is Chad is doing this for Chad. And in some weird ways, I guess that's like the American dream. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's what makes it off-putting. Like a lot of people, there's a subtle, this effect is noticeable in Nickelback songs. I bet people that heard when they heard you quote that aren't surprised at all.
Yeah.
That he writes his songs this way.
I think what surprised me most when I came across that quote is how direct it was. Like, I kind of assumed that maybe he did this unconsciously, but when I read that, I was like, oh no, it was a systematically planned enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I find really interesting is like Chad is a hustler. Like, if you can sell seafood door to door and not like want to go home and kill yourself, then you can like systematically study fucking Mandy Moore songs. I think it was on the radio back then when he's talking about this shit.
Yeah.
Like he's like listening to like not just the rock stuff, not just like Creed or Limp Bizkit or whatever is popular. He's listening to like Britney Spears and NSYNC and like whatever the fuck was popular back then. And he's trying to apply those lessons to Nickelback's music.
I sold a guy warm crabs. Like this is child's play.
I gave an entire block of Vancouver botulism last week. Now, Chad also during this time made the conscious decision to become more direct with his lyrics, stripping them of metaphor and making them as easy to understand as possible. He later referred to this process as, quote, taking the gloves off, and it remains a feature of Nickelback's music to this day, one that is both appreciated by fans and lamented by critics. And I don't want to talk about this too much because we'll get into it later on, but Chad Kroeger's lyrics, even by the standards of popular music, they are very on the nose, right?
Oh, they suck. There's no way around it to me.
Like, you listen to a Nickelback song, like one of the more popular hits, and you know instantly exactly what it's about, like with no like metaphors or even similes anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't be long before these efforts paid off in a big way. Nickelback's third album, Silver Side Up, was released on September 11th, 2001. Yes, I am totally serious about that.
Dude, it sucks we already used that joke once. That wasn't the worst thing that happened.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's actually a number of albums that came out on September 11th. I think Jay-Z's The Blueprint came out on that day, and Toxicity had come out like the week before.
Yeah, Slayer's God Hates Us All was
Yes,
that day.
which
Unfortunate.
very unfortunate timing. It's like, oh yeah, it's like they just engineered that as a publicity stunt.
Yeah, Slayer did 9/11. You heard it here.
Now, this is the album that launched Nickelback into the stratosphere, thanks in large part to its lead single, How You Remind Me. And yeah, we talked about this before, Cal, but like, goddamn, that song was so fucking big.
Yep, it's right up there with like Who Let the Dogs Out. Of just, it lives in my soul. I know all the
Yes.
words for some fucking reason.
Absolutely. And just to give you guys just some numbers here. So that song, it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It is to this day the only Nickelback song to ever go to number 1. Photograph got to number 2. That's the only one that came that close.
Okay.
It was stayed number 1 for 4 weeks, and it was in the top 10 for 20 weeks. Not only that, but it was also the number 1 song in Canada at the same time. Now, the last time a Canadian band had topped the charts in both Canada and the USA was the Guess Who did so in 1970 with American Woman. And furthermore, like, it gets even more insane. How You Remind Me was also the most played song of any genre in 2002. Like, think about that, Cal. Like, I didn't research this, but like, when was the last time a rock and roll song was the biggest song of the year?
This is probably the last one that ever did it.
I honestly can't think of another example of
'cause-
like a rock song getting as big as any other pop song.
Totally agree. Because rap and hip hop and country have all kind of taken over.
Yeah.
This
Like you mentioned Imagine Dragons, like they're the only thing that's like even adjacent to rock that has a chance of getting that big now.
Yeah, and I refuse to call them rock and roll. So.
But like, you know, like Cal and I said before, like I honestly think that if you weren't around to see how huge this song was, it's going to be really tough to imagine why Nickelback became the institution that they are today.
Yep.
Now, Silver Side Up also spawned 2 other big singles, although neither were as huge as How You Remind Me. The first was Never Again, which is a kind of dark tale of spousal abuse from the perspective of a child witness. The other is called Too Bad, and it happens to be the second Nickelback song that I kind of like. Let's hear it.
Other sands are lined with dirt from long days in the field. Another sands are serving meals in a cafe on Main Street with miles to feed. Just trying to keep clothing on our backs, and all I hear about is how it's so bad, it's so bad, it's too bad, it's too bad, too late, so wrong, so long. It's too bad we had no time to rewind. Let's walk, let's talk, let's go. You left without saying goodbye, although I'm sure you tried. You call the house from time to time to make sure we.
Yeah, so I just I like how that one, I think it's very melodic, especially in the chorus. Like it just, I mean, again, I'm not gonna say it's like like on par with Led Zeppelin, but it works for me.
Yeah, Silver Side Up as a whole, like, if you measure it on achieving what it set out to do, it's a good album.
Yeah.
I can respect it. What I can't get around with it is everything we talked about. Like, we're starting to get in this territory where it's kind of devoid of genuine artistic merit,
Yeah.
which is what I value in music. But I could see if you're someone who just wants to have some shit to listen to while you're getting drunk at a bar,
Mm-hmm.
it's a fine album. It's good.
If you measure this against like the top 30 rock and roll albums that were released in 2002, it's probably better than like 70% of them.
Yeah.
Like just because remember how mediocre music was at that specific time period. Like Creed was the #1 band in 2001, and then you had stuff like, I don't know, like Chevelle and Seether and like just Puddle of Mud, like just all this completely generic like neo grunge schlock.
Oh, and like we said too, they write some genuinely catchy songs.
Mhm.
So, I'll give credit to his scientific method.
Yeah.
At least at this point in time.
And another thing about this song particularly is like you heard at the beginning of this episode, like he had kind of a rough childhood. His dad left him, his family grew up poor. So this song is like actually rooted in honesty. And it was actually he said it was kind of a weird one for him to play because of that. Like I read this quote in one interview. He says, "That's a hard one for my dad to listen to when he comes to our shows." And he has to listen to his son sing about it in front of an arena full of people singing along. That's got to be a little torturous.
Yeah, I never thought of it.
It's like they might as well chant, "Chad's dad sucks. Chad's dad sucks.
Fuck you, Wendell."
It's like, yeah, they gotta like go off for lobster or something. It's like, so Chad, I heard that song you did about the dad leaving his family. Where'd you come up with that? How about a song where you think, maybe dad was just sick of his nagging bitch ass wife, and maybe he just need to breathe for a second. Turn that into a hit. So needless to say, Silver Side Up was a colossal success, not just in America and Canada, but across the world. Went platinum 8 times in Canada, 6 times in America, and 3 times in the UK. And when you listen to the critical reviews of this album, like none of them are great, but none of them are terrible either. Like as you said, Cal, like this is fine. It is a fine album, and so you see a lot of like 2.5 and 3 star reviews across the board. So a lot of people were saying even back then that like this is like a little too derivative of Nirvana and Pearl Jam, but it's like it's nowhere near on the level of like fuck Nickelback,
right?
However, though, in August of 2002, the band did get a small taste of the rabid anti-Nickelback hatred that would eventually follow them and to some extent define their career. This incident occurred at a festival, and I'm absolutely gonna pronounce this wrong. I'm sorry. There's a festival in Portugal called Ilha do Ermal. And this festival is a festival that primarily books metal, kind of hard rock acts. So kind of like, with their placement on Roadrunner, Nickelback's kind of not a great fit for this bill.
I've seen this happen in person.
Mm-hmm.
A misbooked band get booed off at a metal show.
Yeah.
Their agents need to fucking know better.
Yeah. It's
there was a time Crazy Town, who will probably be
a
mini-sode or something. They made that stupid ass Butterfly song. They got booked at Ozfest one year. They never got to finish a set because it was like whoever booked that is a moron.
Well, they are just like in Ozfest, like they vary a lot. Like some of it is like genuine, like old school metal. Some of it is like crappy new metal. Crazy Town kind of falls into more of the crappy new metal.
Yeah, I think that's what
vibe.
they thought would happen.
But like they're to be too bad for that crowd.
Well,
and they are a terrible band.
I don't think their agents were honest with what that band is because they don't even have the angry edge of new metal. They don't. It's this like manicured sound to for girls to dance to and shit.
Yeah, it's like just like imagine like Fred Durst without even the scintilla of creativity that is in Limp Bizkit. It's just like really just trash, like guy who works at the Jiffy Lube.
The problem is more like do you really think angry Bubba who drove his truck there and he really loves Pantera? Do you think he wants to hear "You're my butterfly, sugar baby." No.
No, God.
So I can totally see what happened here already.
Yeah. So, and that is essentially what happens is, so they start playing and they get through one song, and then they are in midway through the second song when people begin throwing shit at the stage, including some rocks. And in response to that, Chad stops playing. He sets his guitar down, and then this happens.
Have we got any Nickelback fans in Portugal? Are you sure? Up to you. You guys want to hear some rock and roll, or you want to go home? See ya.
Yeah. So he asked if anyone is into Nickelback. There were very few affirmative responses in what is actually a pretty large crowd, and they left.
Well, I'll say this: if you don't like the band, that's fine. Throwing rocks is never cool.
Yeah, no, don't do that shit. Like,
give him the finger, boo, do whatever you want to do, but don't try and hurt the guy. Jesus.
Yeah, right. At least think of the equipment.
Yeah,
like that Marshall amp deserves more respect than your, rocker water bottle. But no, I actually feel more bad for Nickelback here because it's not their fault they got booked. Their management is just seeing dollar signs.
I've always felt that was the purpose of my whole rant earlier. I kind of always felt bad when I'd watch a band get just so booed off that it was
yeah,
they have feelings. Come on.
Yeah. Plus, if you're there, it's not like if you boo them off, the next guy is gonna come up immediately and start doing their set. No, there's just gonna be an hour of milling about.
Yep.
All right, but aside from that incident, things were generally going really well for Nickelback. And in September of 2003, the band released their fourth album, The Long Road, an album which would prove almost as successful as its predecessor. So, Cal, what did you think of this one?
Well, I'm surprised it was almost as successful. That must be the factor we talked about with Billy Ray, his second album.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's coasting off how good Silver Side Up was. Because this album to me feels like a bunch of songs that didn't make the cut for that album.
Yeah.
I think this one is painfully mediocre.
It is. It's, I would say it's a half step down. It's still not offensively bad to me, but it really, I agree, Cal. It's it feels like their main goal for this was to just continue what was successful about Silver Side Up. And that's a very common thing for even genuinely good bands for do. It's we did this thing, it worked, let's try it again. Especially if you've been on the road nonstop, and they've been touring for at this point 4 years nonstop without a break. So they don't really have time to reinvent the wheel or to grow artistically,
right?
Or to try to come up with some brand new Beatles-esque insight as to how to change rock and roll. So I can understand why they would just try to do the same thing again. So yeah, so this whole album is basically, again, simple hard rock songs, easy to digest lyrics. There's the lead single Someday that sounds almost exactly like How You Remind Me.
I'm too lazy to do it, but there's one song that it's almost identical. Not necessarily the exact chords, but the progression.
Mm-hmm.
You can literally sit down and sing How You Remind Me over that song.
Yeah.
And it all fits. It all lines up.
They we'll get into this more later on, but they use the same progressions in the same structure. It's the structure that they repeat more often than anything else. But they do it on this one. And but even just lyrically, that's the single Someday is about conflict in a relationship.
Yep.
Just like How You Remind Me. There's other songs that deal with that essentially. And then there's another song called Believe It or Not, which is, I think, one of the first Nickelback songs that truly feels like pandering to me. And this is a song that I'm going to call it a trying to be deep song. And these are some of the lyrics. Believe it or not, everyone has things they hide. Believe it or not, everyone keeps most things inside. Believe it or not, everyone believes in something above. believe it or not, everyone needs to feel loved.
Yes, that is the general human experience, Chad. Thank you.
Cal, when I first heard that, it reminds me of something that Dot Wiggins from the Shags would write.
Yeah, it does.
It's just like, it's
Believe
so
it
basic.
or not, everyone has things inside.
but at least they would have come up with an interesting melody.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this album, it's like, it's not great, but there are 2 songs that I want to highlight from The Long Road, and it's because I believe both of them are going to introduce themes which will feature prominently in the remaining half of Nickelback's career. So the first one is the album's second single, the song Figured You Out. Let's take a listen.
I like your pants around your feet, and I like the dirt that's on your knees, and I like the way you still say please while you're looking up at me. You're like my favorite damn disease, and I love the places that we go, and I love the people that you know, and I love the way you can't say no to many long lines in a row. I love the powder on your nose. Ooh, and now I know who you are. It wasn't that hard just to figure you out. And now I know who you are. It wasn't that hard just to figure you out.
Jesus Christ.
Dude, I want to go on record and say I fucking hate that song. And
Yeah, no
that's
shit.
that's the one. I remember when that came out. That was when I realized I didn't like Nickelback. Even when that first line comes out, it's like, I like your pants. I'd be like, this fucking song, and I'd be
Ugh.
changing it instantly.
Yeah, like there's so much about that one. Like Cal, you mentioned that there was a comment on the YouTube video for
yeah,
this,
I scrolled down a little. It says, truck driver here. I'm in the middle of a desert in Texas, and I just rocked out to this 3 times in a row. 4 exclamation points.
Like that is the exact type of person that vibes with this song, and like it's the first of many Nickelback songs that are gonna kind of profit off of like what you might call casual misogyny, and like this is the beginning. This is the first song to my mind that really hones in on this, and it's going to become more and more of a problem as we move on. But like just it's just, for me, it's just like, it's gross, man.
Yeah. Oh, it's fucking gross.
Like I like the white stains on your dress. I like the way you can't say no.
Yeah, none of that shit is hot. If you find that hot, I have questions for you. And later he's got a line. He goes, I like the way you smack my ass. Now I'm forced to have a mental image of Chad's bare ass.
No
getting
one
smacked.
wants to think about that.
Yeah.
Like please, for the love of God. Ugh. And I kind of also share this quote from Chad. He's trying to explain what this is all about. He says, the song starts off like most relationships do, very, very physically oriented. And then you start discovering things about the person that you're with, like, okay, I don't like that about you, or that, or that. Okay, now the only thing we have in common is that we have great sex. So there's no more point in us being together.
It's literally, I fucked you and I left you.
Yeah, it's just like,
I figured you out now. We boned and, started talking afterwards.
Yeah, so I think he is like 32 by the time this
Jesus
comes
Christ.
out. So that's too old to be still thinking like that. If you're 19 and that's your experience with women, like, okay, whatever. But like, he's like, you're a grown ass man.
Yeah.
Like, just like, you should be able to figure her out before she ever even talks to you. That type of girl, the type of girl that's like coked out and sleazy, like, that's not hard to figure out. Like, if you should know that it's not worth it, like, right away. But I guess when you're caught up in the rock star lifestyle, like, I don't know. But the main like actual problem with this is that Chad is being judgmental here. Like, take like the figurative woman in this song for what she is. Like, okay, she's doing coke, like she's hanging with the wrong people, but like Chad is like very judgmental towards her, and like maybe it's not a problem in this song as much, but it's going to become a big problem later on. Is like Chad kind of slut shaming,
Right.
essentially.
Well, and you're doing all this shit with her, man.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
at the same parties. Yeah.
And how many songs is Chad eventually going to write about like getting drunk and hanging out with his buddies? But when a woman does it, it's like, wrong and
Yeah.
like, just shameful.
I figured you out.
Figure yourself out, bro. And then the second song I want to talk about is a song called "Should Have Listened." So this is like another kind of like breakup song, like Chad feeling guilty about like cheap sex or a relationship deteriorating, something like that. But I don't really want to focus on the lyrics so much as the way that he is singing them. So let's hear the song first, and then I want to tell you what I think is interesting about it.
There's clothes all over the floor. Don't remember them being here before. Smell of perfume isn't here. White lipstick on the mirror, and still I don't understand. No pictures left in the hall. There's 3 new holes in my wall. Where the hell's my credit cards? Why's my wallet in the yard? And still I don't understand. Well, now I guess I should have listened when you said you'd had enough. A little trick I picked up from my father, in one ear and out the other. Why's love gotta be so tough?
So the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because I think it's the first example of a type of Nickelback song that I refer to as stealth country. So this is like this is going to be a thing, isn't it, Cal?
Yes.
We'll get into this more later on, but I think a lot of Nickelback songs, to me, sound like country in all but name.
Oh, yes.
Like,
Big time.
And when I say country, like, obviously it's not like Hank Williams. Like, it's not.
He's talking modern, pandering ass country.
Yeah, modern shitty country that you hear on the radio, where like it's very lyrically driven and just with an acoustic guitar and a very easy to digest story.
Yes.
And like no real instrumentation to speak of.
Yep. And I think Chad recognized that his fan base has a lot of overlap with that fan base.
Yes.
And he leans into it.
I read one interview where he straight up says, like, even though I'm a Canadian, I think I tap into middle America.
He does.
And that's absolutely true. Now, in case you're not convinced, consider that just a few years after this song came out, it was covered by country superstar Travis Tritt. And as you're about to hear, Travis barely had to change a thing.
There's clothes all over the floor. Don't remember them being here before. Smell of perfume isn't here. Why's lipstick on the mirror? Still I don't understand. No pictures left in the hall. There's 3 new holes in my wall. Where the hell's my credit card? Why's my wallet in the yard? Still I don't understand. Well, now I guess I should have listened when you said you'd had enough. A little trick I picked up from my father, in one ear and out the other. Why's love gotta be so tough?
Yep.
See what I mean?
No distortion. Southern vocal style. That's all he did.
It like it's instant country, just add twang.
Yep.
Like, and I don't know about you, Cal. Well, let me ask you, which version of those two did you like better? I'm not gonna. Okay, obviously,
yeah, okay. No, I like Travis's because that feels a little more how that's the delivery I would expect for a song like that.
Yeah, I think it's, even though it's the exact same song, somehow it sounded better coming out of Travis Tritt's mouth. I'm not even like a Travis Tritt fan at all. It just like somehow when it's not Chad, it's easier to digest for me. Same thing with when Avril covered "How You Remind Me." It's just I don't know.
Do you
man.
think it's we both know various versions of this guy in our real lives? I don't know. I'm trying to think of why. Because I agree. I have a distaste for Chad. This episode has done nothing to help his case for me.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into why Chad himself is, for a lot of people kind of unlikable, but like I'll just stick with right now my criticism of I just don't like his voice.
Yeah.
And he can't help it. I get that his voice is what it is, but it doesn't do it for me. Just as like I'm sure some people have opened up this podcast and turned it off just because they didn't like
sure.
our voices.
Yeah,
like, and that's
it
fine.
happens.
That's fine. I don't blame you for that. All right, folks. That about wraps it up for this episode. But do not worry, we are just getting warmed up. Into the years to come, Nickelback is going to hone in on the formula of repetitive riffs and kindergarten-level lyrics that made them a big success in the first place. And in the process, they'll produce some of their biggest hits, including Photograph, but they'll also take their music to new depths of embarrassment and pandering, and eventually engender a backlash the likes of which have never been seen. All of that's coming up in Nickelback Part 2. All right, Cal. So, what did we learn today in this beginning overview of Nickelback's discography?
I think at least so far, the argument of they're not actually that bad. Okay, people that say that I think are referring to this portion of the discography that we covered today.
Yeah,
I'll agree there. Nothing we've covered yet is like meme level bad.
Yeah, I like these first 4 albums. Like, if that had been the end of their career and they like died in a plane crash afterwards, like we wouldn't be doing an episode about Nickelback.
Yeah, they'd just be remembered as that one band that some people liked and some people thought was okay.
Yeah. So, but I think in our next episode, it's gonna get much more embarrassing. For most people, for some people, like they're gonna be fondly reminisce over hits that they grew up with and resonate with somehow.
That's when he finally started saying what I think.
Yeah. So definitely stay tuned for that. And if you like this show, please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram as polishing.turds. We're on Facebook too. We post a lot of additional content on those sites, and also give you information of when episodes are going to come out. We do polls, try to solicit input from our audience members. So we really try to stay connected to the fans of this show. And on that note, let me just take a moment to acknowledge a bit of a milestone that we have reached recently. About a week ago, we surpassed 10,000 lifetime downloads of Polishing Turds. So yay for us, but really yay for you guys, because you people are what made all of this possible. Everybody that's ever shared or liked us or just downloaded this podcast or became a fan of it in any form. I never thought we would get this far.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not YouTube numbers or anything, but for a podcast just done by 2 random weirdos.
Yeah, for 2 random weirdos with no experience and no real talent.
Yeah, it's gone further than expected. Yeah, and we're very appreciative.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. But other than that, we will see you next time, and always do the next right thing.
Never
The
made
man
it
is a wise man.
I couldn't cut it as a poor man stealing.
It's oh god, it's so infectious. I do have a playlist up too.
I have been pissing Jessica off all week.
Oh, me too.
I
Oh my
just
god.
randomly, and I'll be in the kitchen. It's not like you. Say sorry.